Hi, so this is HackerRank, the platform that Pico uses to collect most of its contests. If you're not registered already, you register by signing up. If not, log in for developers and you'll be redirected to the HackerRank homepage. So you'll be provided a link of the contest. You can just directly copy paste here or just type this slug itself. In this case, it's the very moment. So you'll be redirected to the contest page. So generally, the link that you get will be before the contest starts. There'll be a countdown timer that's going on. Once it hits 0, you'll be redirected to the page and you'll be able to see all the questions. These admin options won't be available to you, obviously. It's only to the administrator of the contest. Beyond that, you'll be having the current leaderboard. You can compare your progress, you can review all your submissions, and in general, all your questions will be displayed here. If you click on a question, you'll be redirected to the question. You see the question statement itself, the input, out constraints, output format, sample input and output, the editor itself, and here you can change whatever language you're comfortable with. If you just go back, you can view all the different questions. There's no particular order that you have to solve in. You also see the submissions here, previous submissions. Generally, the questions go from easy to hard, top to bottom. And you can just pick whatever order you want to solve it. Yep. Let's just go ahead and start solving question number 1. And just view the question itself. Here we go in the description of the question, which in general gives you a pretty good idea of what the question is about and gives you a good idea about the context of the question, right? So in Mr. key, there's a secret hidden by a magical gate. Unlock this gate, you must decipher the code hidden within a string of numbers and characters. You're given a string consisting of a single character. Yeah, so this is where the important stuff is, right? So, you're given a string consisting of a single character followed by a single integer separated by a space. Your task is to determine whether the ASCII value of the character is equal to the integer. If they are equal, print yes. Otherwise, print no. Cool. You are given the input format, which basically tells you what and how exactly are you getting the input. If you see, you can directly see the sample input and output and get a pretty good general idea of what the question is giving you and what is the expected output. There you can see ASCII value of A is 65, so it's a yes. ASCII value of 1 is not 97, so it's a no. One thing you have to keep in mind is the character, it is case sensitive, right? So if you write IES in small, it's not going to accept. It's very case sensitive because there's a direct 1-to-1 comparison that's going on behind the scenes, right? So if you look at the input again, so you get a single line construct consisting of a character which is of single length. So if you see mod C here, basically represents a character, the length of the character, which is 1. So you get a single character. You won't be getting something like A or Z. Followed by a single integer, which is between that, 0 to 127. Good. And here are the constraints here. So constraints basically give you a good idea about what the range of values that you can be expecting for a particular variable or a particular type, right? Beyond that, constraints also help you, if you don't completely get the idea of a question, like advanced questions as such, it gives you a pretty good idea of what the expectation of the questionnaire is. Depending on the range, what is the complexity of the answer that they're expecting, you can decipher this a bit. Probably beyond the scope of this video, we'll cover this topic in another video if possible. Coming back to this, so output will be a single line consisting of yes, if it's a match, otherwise it's a no. So let's just start with the code. So I'm typing this code in C++. I just check the latest one. And you can see the input here, right? So A space 65. You can just assume it something like you type in the terminal. So A space 65 and then enter. So if that is the case, what do you code it? You just go with using variables to do a simple scene. First you get a character, then you get an integer. And then you can just define the logic here, right? Just go ahead and the C input line. If that is true, just see out this. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So like you just test it out by running the code. So this, if you just run the code, it'll check the code against the sample test cases we have here. And only when you submit, it'll check against our browser. So if you're confident here, you can just submit the code. And if you submit it, it'll actually check against our hidden test cases that are there. So here you can see that it passed all the test cases. So hence you're getting the complete score of 10. So if you go back to the problem itself, you can see, oh, the code is no longer here. So if you want to get back the code or the code that you've previously typed, you can just go to submissions here, go to view results, and then you can see the code here, right? You can just open it and enter again. So let's just assume you didn't type in the way it was specified here and you just type the wrong one here, right? So yes, just try running it. Yeah, so it did work out. So what is expecting is capital YES, but what you're getting is not in that format. So let's just run, submit the code and see what happens to me. So when you submit the code, you can see it passed a few test cases and it didn't in a few others. And if you actually see the score here, it's 0 here. So here, in this particular case, in this particular question, you're getting a binary result. So if all the test cases are passed, only then are you getting the complete score. Others, it's 0. So they are generally 2 cases. Okay, so one is binary, the one here. Or you can get partial marks if the few of the test cases are okay and few others you're not able to pass, maybe because of time constraints or something like that. And yeah, obviously we shouldn't have partial results here because we can just print yes or no and could probably get like a decent 50% of the score. And yeah, that's it. Let's just go to the next question. So actually, before going on to the next question, remember how I said this is basically like passing it as a string. So what if you create a string variable and then use the getLine function to accept the complete string? So how would you accept the input in this case then? How would you process the input activity? Something to think about. If you get the answer, put in the comment section below. So let's just actually move on to the next one. Moving on to the next question, array what? So array what is a very simple, just print the sum of array elements given. Even though the question is very simple, it will give you a good foundational understanding of whatever the basics are required to solve almost all kind of problems, like almost not data structures related, but basic mathematical algorithmic formula-based questions. So if you just see, you'll be getting a bunch of integers. First line contains an integer denoting the size of the array. A second line contains an n-spaced integer representing the array's elements. So you get the size of the array, which is 6, and then you get the 6 elements. You basically have to return, or in this case print, the sum of all the elements. And if you see the constraints, you see that n is up to 1,000. And each element, a of I that is, also the range is up to 1,000. You can just use an integer in the type here and just print the sum. And so let's just get coding. So moving on to solving in C++. The first line that we're getting is an integer that represents the size of the array. So let's accept that first. And say n. And then we'll save all the array elements in a vector. You can just have the teacher array of n, and then we'll have another variable to store the sum. This iteratively go through accepting all the elements. So as if 0, I should be less than n, I plus, and then step values and save it 10 array. So specialty about using vectors instead of just using standard like arrays is you can dynamically allocate space there. So you don't actually have to mention the space as such here. You can just use the pushback function to add new elements to the end of the array. And if you have actually noticed, we don't have to, save the array elements that we're getting. You can just have a temporary variable here, like int k or something, and then just accept the k and add it here, because you're not using those values anymore, right? As soon as you submit. But in case of maybe reversing an array, for example, you'll have to store the array. So hence, just show you how we can do that. And this is that. Start it. Looks. To submit the code. Yeah. So vector is part of the standard template library in C++, and I encourage you to explore the C++ STL, get a feel for how it works, what are the different functions there are, and how each of them work in what environments. You'll find plenty of questions pertaining to each one of its features. So explore and happy coding. Going on to the next question though.
Now this is the CPP version or the C++ version of solving the vowel counter problem. First, we create variables for storing the number of strings and number of vowels, and for the number of strings. Then we'll have to read in the number of strings, and we need to create a character array to store the string that you input. In C++, there will be a string data type itself instead of a character array. So C in S will store the string into S, and using a for loop going from 0 to length of S, remember length is a function here, I'll be checking if S of j, that is a character, is a vowel or not. That is double equals to small a, double equals to small e, all separated by or keyword or the or symbols. You don't need to give capitals here because according to the question, you'll only encounter small letters in this question. So if I encounter any of these, I'll increment my vowel counter vowel ++. And I'll have to print it out using cout. So now I'll run the code, and as you can see, there's some compiler errors, but don't worry, those are warnings, not exactly errors. It's fine even if they appear. As long as your program works, it's a-okay. This is the explanation on the vowel counters 2 problem. You'll be given n strings and you have to print the total number of vowels in all the strings together. The strings that you're going to get are guaranteed to be having only small letters. They'll not contain any capitals, they'll not contain any special cases like spaces, underscores, $, #, nothing of that. And they won't be containing numbers. You have to print the number of vowels that you have as one integer. That's it. You're not supposed to print any extra stuff. Input format. First line will contain the integer n. So if you have 3 strings, the first line will contain the number 3. The next 3 lines, that is line number 2, 3, 4, will contain the strings. That is, the next n lines will contain strings 1 to string n. And any string will only contain small letters. Constraints. These are the limitations of the input we are going to give to your program. You don't have to write the limitations into your program, but you can just build your program around this so it's easier for you. So first limitation that we are going to put for our test cases, not for your programs. You can put as you like for your programs. First limitation, you will have between 1 and 100 strings, that is n strings. N is always between 1 and 100. And then the length of a string that you're going to get, each string is also guaranteed to be between 1 and 100 characters in length. This does not include the null character, so you'll have to handle that separately. Now if you look at the the sample input, you have 1 as the first letter n, so you're going to read one string, home. In home there are 2 vowels, so you have to output 2. In the second sample input, you have 3 as the first line, so there will be 3 total strings that you have to read. The strings are jitter containing 2 vowels, fruit containing 2 vowels, and burglary containing 2 vowels. Total of 6 vowels, so I'll have to output 6. So this is sample code. I have n to store the number of strings I'll have to read, vowel to store the number of vowels I encounter. I first read n and then I make a loop, go from I to n, and I read n strings. And then I make a loop inside that to go through every character in the string that I've read, string A, and check if it's a vowel. If it's a vowel, I increment it. And then finally, after all of these operations get over, I print the number of vowels. On running, there might be some problems like this. Don't worry if it's a compile message. As long as your code is running, it's generally fine.